When I first tried pouring resin, I was ridiculously excited about it. I carved out some river shapes, tinted the resin, poured it in, and when it cured, it was very clearly a river. You could look at it immediately and say, that's what it's supposed to be. But it didn't feel like a river. And that's the distinction it took me a while to understand. Because if someone drew two green riverbanks with a felt tip and put a blue squiggly line between them, you would still recognize that they were drawing a river. But recognizing something and believing it are two very different things. Over time, I realized that making a river feel alive isn't about the resin itself. It's about the small decisions that surround it. So if you want your resin rivers to feel like moving water rather than colored glass, there are a few things that make a big difference. The first thing that sells a river is the shape. Rivers don't behave like trenches cut into the ground. They wander, they bend, and they change direction as they move through the landscape. With this Mordheim board, I was slightly hamstrung by the layout. The board is 5 feet long by 2 feet wide, and it needed 4 bridge positions, and the bridges were quite large, as well as 2 fords with access to the fords as well. That meant the river had to run broadly straight throughout the table, and in order to make everything work. But straight doesn't mean perfectly straight. Even with those constraints, I was able to build something with gentle curves and subtle changes in direction. Those small shifts create opportunities later on to make the water look like it's actually flowing through the scene. And that's really the key idea. The more the river looks believable in its shape, the easier it is for the viewer to believe that the water inside it is moving. Once the basic shape is in place, the next thing that really sells it is the riverbanks. Rivers don't just sit inside neat trenches. The land around them is constantly being eroded and reshaped by the water. When I build riverbanks, I start by cutting and blocking out the basic shape, and then I work my way along that, cutting off different angles, pulling out different chunks and blocks from the layout itself, and that starts to feel more like a landscape. It starts to feel more natural and uneven. On this board, the banks were actually quite a bit higher than I would normally build them, which actually gave me an opportunity. Because once you've got that height, you can create like a second tier down in the bank below. And that low tier doesn't have to perfectly follow the top edge of the riverbank. It can drift outwards in places, creating smaller areas where the river widens before narrowing again. Those little variations break up the shape and make the whole thing feel much more like a natural landscape, rather than just a channel through which the river flows. Once the banks are in place, the next thing that starts to bring things to life is the riverbed itself. A riverbed isn't just a flat surface under the water. It has variation in both texture, color, and depth. And those variations help to sell the idea that water is constantly moving through that landscape. When I add stones to the riverbed, I usually place the larger ones close to the banks and then use progressively smaller stones towards the center of the river. And unless I'm deliberately creating a very shallow section of river or a ford, I will normally leave the central channel clear of stones and any debris whatsoever. That gives the impression that stronger current has carried material further downstream and kept the middle of the river relatively open. The other thing that really creates the idea of depth is the way the riverbed is painted. A lot of people rely solely on the tint they're going to put into the resin itself to get the depth effect and to get the color. But the color of the riverbed itself will actually influence the final appearance of the water far more than the resin does. For this river, the buyer wanted a slightly turquoisey green color, so I painted the riverbed in stages to build that effect. Close to the banks where the smaller stones meet the water, I used an olive green. Moving inward, I went to a brown, and then right in the center, it was as black as I could make it, to suggest that that was the deepest part, and you wouldn't actually be able to see the bottom at that point. While the paint was still wet, I gave those colors a simple blend together so the transitions weren't too harsh. Resin is transparent, so the water will mostly take the appearance from whatever is underneath it. If the riverbed is just one flat color, the river will usually end up looking flat as well. But if the riverbed already has variation in the color and tone, the resin simply amplifies and the illusion of it, and the depth appears almost automatically. Once the riverbed is in place, the next step is going to give the water something to interact with. So when building this river, I made sure there were plenty of small bits which jutted out and went into the flow of the water slightly. They don't have to be large. Even small stones or little irregularities can break up the surface and create places where the water can react. Those interruptions give the water a reason to behave differently in different places, and that variation is what makes the river start to feel alive. Once everything underneath the water is ready, the next step is to get the resin color right. And the most useful trick here is building color in layers rather than trying to get the perfect color in a single pour. For this river, I started with a thin brown layer for the bottom. The bottom of rivers tends to be slightly murky because of all of the sediment that's built up, so that first layer immediately dulls down the brightness and stops water from looking too clean or too artificial. After pouring that brown layer, I waited until the resin reached what's known as the green stage. That's when the resin has started to cure and thicken, and it's no longer completely liquid, but hasn't fully cured either. At that stage, you can pour another layer on top without the colors completely mixing together, which is exactly what I did. So once the brown layer had reached that point, I poured a pretty bright looking blue layer over the top. But something that's worth keeping in mind when tinting resin is that the color will almost never look the same once it's poured as it does in the mixing pot. When you're looking at the resin in the cup, you're looking through several inches of liquid, and that depth makes it look far more tinted than it actually is. A much better way to judge the color is just to take a small drop of resin and put it on a white sheet of paper, let it spread out a little bit, and then see what the color looks like in that position, because that is going to give you a much more accurate read on the resin tint. In general, it's also best to add color gradually. For this pour, I used acrylic inks and added them literally one drop at a time until the color looked right. Once the resin is fully cured, and it usually looks glossy and very satisfying, and there's always a temptation to leave it like that, especially if there's lots of visible detail underneath. The problem is that perfectly smooth resin tends to look more like glass than water, and once it looks like glass, the illusion that water is moving completely disappears. So to bring that movement back, I used Vallejo water texture across the surface of the river, and that's my go-to product for this. There are other ways to do this as well. You can thin down something like Mod Podge and move it around with a straw or an airbrush or even a hairdryer. But for me, using a brush and water texture is my personal preference. It gives me a bit more control over where everything goes. The key is varying how heavy the texture is. For areas where the water is very disturbed, I'll use heavy stippling with a brush. This dries mostly clear, but the thicker it is, the more translucent it will be, so I try to avoid putting it on too heavily. If the ridges become too thick, they stop looking like water and they start looking a bit more like paste. So, for areas where the water is moving steadily, I stroke the brush only in the direction that the water would be moving. That creates long surface shapes that look like the water is flowing through the river. You can also make those strokes interact with the obstacles that you've put in earlier, which reinforces that the current is reacting to the landscape. So if you meet a rock in the river, those brush strokes all of a sudden create a kind of Y shape as they go around that, selling the idea that they're having to move past that, selling the idea of movement. Once the surface texture is in place, the final step in bringing the water to life is highlighting the areas where it becomes disturbed. For doing that, I first apply a thin coat of gloss medium across the whole surface. This brings everything back to life again, because the water texture kind of takes the sheen off of the water. Water tends to be quite shiny, so I like to bring it back. You can selectively put it on certain areas. You can use that as a highlighting tool if you want. I personally prefer just to slap it across the whole thing. Another technique you can use, and you'll often see, is people dry brushing white or off-white across the tops of the ripples. That can work really well, but it's never been something that I've really managed to get looking right for myself. Instead, I prefer to use Valhalla Blizzard on the tips of the waves and the ripples that I want to be more prominent, and this also works particularly well where the water is interacting heavily with something else. For example, where the current hits a rock or obstacles in the river, where it pushes against the banks, or where the water is breaking against itself in rapids or waterfalls. Showing where the water is hitting something and the direction that the interaction is happening is one of the most reliable ways to make the resin feel more alive. The final step is adding some vertical movement. Now, originally, this river was just going to run across the board with yet another bridge crossing, but for the sake of a bit more drama, I suggested adding a waterfall. Thankfully, the client thought this was a great idea and even suggested making it even taller. Something like a waterfall, or even something as simple as a leaking pipe, is an incredibly obvious visual cue that immediately tells the viewer which direction the water is flowing. Your river doesn't need to drop as dramatically as this one. Even a small step in the riverbed by like half an inch can clearly indicate the direction of the current. Now, the waterfall is the most eye-catching part of the river, without a doubt, but strangely, it's also one of the easiest to build. To create mine, I anchored a bit of cling film at the top using UV resin. I cut and twisted the cling film until I had the right shape and make sure it kind of taut so it doesn't feel like it's sagging at all. I then ran the UV resin down the surface and cured it as it fell, which creates a really solid but translucent sheet of water. After that, I added Valhalla Blizzard to the top and the bottom to create the froth where the water is crashing and churning. A little more of that texture across the front of it to give the water turbulence as it drops. And finally, finishing everything off with a coat of gloss medium to bring the shine back. When all of those pieces come together, the shape, the banks, the riverbed, the obstacles, the color, the surface movement, and the disturbances, the resin stops looking like poured plastic and starts behaving like water. And that's really the goal. Not just to make something that looks like a river, but making something that feels alive.